Welcome to Talk Flicks with Kids and Chicks. I am Krystal,
And I'm Nicole.
and today we're going to be reviewing Captain Marvel. So there was a lot of buzz behind this movie, not necessarily positive buzz.
Not buzz, controversy.
Controversy. Yeah, there we go. Drama. So what was your take on the drama with, Brie Larson and her statements?
The drama had a lot to do with male ego, the fragility of the male ego. She made some comments about being inclusive when it comes to the media that is represented at these press junkets for movies. And she said to the effect that if a movie is geared towards women of color or people of color, then why aren't people of color being represented when the media shows up? Because she, and I'm not saying this is word for word, but she said, I don't care what a 40-year-old white man thinks about A Wrinkle in Time. I want to know what a woman of color thinks.
Other people besides white dudes like Star Wars and would love the opportunity to do a set visit. And I'm also saying I don't hate white dudes. I'm just saying we need to be conscious of our bias and do our part to make sure that everyone is in the room.
And for those that may not know, the film and media market is really hard to break into as a person of color. Just about all of the interviews and the things that you read online are written by white men. And what she was saying is, no, we don't want to take positions away from them. We want to add to it. She wants to have more people included that is representative of what our country actually looks like. And it is made up of more than just older white men. There are black women, black men, Latino men, and Latino women, Asians. I mean, all of these underrepresented minorities that, are just now starting to get their shine on TV. And now, people are upset because there's pressure to change in other areas of the film and media industry. And, the outrage was absurd. In the comment section, you would hear people calling her a CUNT. Because she said that she wanted people to be included. And then here they come with the SJW agenda, which I feel like is kind of the new way of calling somebody a N-word lover. Because somebody wants to see somebody else being treated fairly, then they have a SJW agenda. This shouldn't be forced on us. These are comics. I use these to escape. Well, what about people of color? We use these same movies, these same comics, these same books to escape, and we want a seat at the table. Yeah. And they have benefited, the industry has benefited off of our talent for many, many years, a lot of times not getting the recognition that they deserve. And a lot of things in the movies that are made for us, these members of the press that are not of color miss some of the more subtle and minute details of a movie.
I feel like this movie, you're going to see a lot of bad reviews because people are not even judging the movie based on the movie, but based on what Brie Larson said. And so they're automatically jaded to everything. Like, literally, I'm going to have to call out some people. People who I watch, like I said, I'm subscribed to their channel. But I was watching their review, and I'm like, you just literally contradicted yourself. Mm-hmm. So the first person I'm going to call out is Chris Stuckman. He was literally talking about how all the fight scenes were not good.
There is not a single memorable fight in this movie, not just from a visual perspective, but from a choreography perspective. Fight scene where she has these metal braces on her hands and she's trying to break them by busting her hand against a spaceship wall and they won't shatter, so she just has to punch people really hard to try to get these things off of her hands. That was a badass scene. Probably my favorite fight scene in the movie.
But you just said you didn't like any of it. And I feel like because he's a white man in America and they were upset that she said she didn't care what these white men think, he automatically just went in with a negative attitude, and even stuff that he actually liked, he disregarded or forgot about it because in the front of his mind was the fact that this lady who played this role has said that she didn't care what white men thought about A Wrinkle in Time. A whole different movie. And I feel like it just kind of makes me laugh because it's like these people are so sensitive about something that's really not even that big of a deal. Like Nicole said, this is a movie that really wasn't even for the target audience was not white men. It was for women and women of color, people who watch Oprah, which is mostly women, like middle-aged women and stuff like that. So to me, I didn't see how, people really took that out of proportion. It was like, oh, she doesn't care what any white man thinks ever about any movie. They, whatever. And I'm like, that's not what she said.
She said several times in the clip, I do not hate white men. But then when you go into these comment sections, you repeatedly hear people saying, she says she hates white men.
Also, I need to call out a man named Jeremy John, who also I watch his reviews on YouTube, and his review was so stupid. Like, I'm gonna just have to call it what it is. This dude. Okay, so I watched this review before I even saw the movie. And like I said, I like his reviews. And usually what he says, I kind of agree with it for the most part. I mean, he kind of be being silly, but for the most part, I kind of agree with what he says. So I'm like, oh, wow. And so one of the things he said was,
this movie relies on what we've been told by people. And we've been told outside the movie that Captain Marvel is the most powerful MCU hero ever. But the movie never shows us anything to validate that. Like, did she take a dying star to the chest? I feel like that's the metric. That's what Thor did. That's pretty strong. By the end of this, I don't feel like she could take a dying star to the chest and live.
And when I went in there and watched this movie, I said, bro, she literally stopped a ballistic missile with her bare hands. She mollywopped everybody by herself. Like, literally, she was held captive physically and mentally, and still got free.
But before she even had the full strength of her powers, she was whooping.
She was beating everybody. So I'm just like, you didn't see this movie. Like,
but you know what really
just did this review. You know what? As a disgruntled white man, that's how I feel, because I'm like, you didn't watch this movie. There's no way you watched this movie, and then you did that review and said those things. You were mad that she said what she said, and then you just straight said, you know what, this movie was stupid. They didn't even show her being powerful because you didn't care. You went in with that mentality of, I don't like this movie, so I'm gonna make up stuff and justify why it's not a good movie with stuff. It wasn't even factual what he was saying.
What really irritated me about his review was when he brought up Thor from Infinity Wars, that he took the brunt of a dying star, and I was like, she wouldn't have to. She would use her blasters and get it started again.
Right.
Because she's that powerful.
Right.
So, and I was like, Thor can't even fly without his hammer.
Right.
So I was like, clearly, she is the most powerful person in the MCU. If you really take the time and analyze it.
I mean, you don't even have to analyze, Nicole. Like, literally, the things we just said. Yeah. She beat that granny up like nobody's business on that train. Like, it was just so much stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, wow.
And really, the only reason she wasn't beating Jude Law's character in the beginning was because he was mentally abusing her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she had that thing on her neck. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was because he was a good fighter, but she was a killer fighter. She was taking out whole squads on her own.
Women have to do a lot. So like I said, I was actually, because I'm not the biggest like superhero fan. It's just like, oh, I know everything that's ever happened. I read every comic book. And when I first heard that Captain Marvel was a woman and that she was the most powerful in the universe, I was just kind of like shocked, to be honest with you, because I didn't even think that Captain Marvel, like I said, I hear Captain, I'm thinking it's a guy anyway. And so I was just like, oh, okay. And then when I started to see, the different trailers and the posters and stuff like that, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. But yeah, I just feel like you'll see a lot of bad reviews that really don't give this movie just now. There were plot holes and things that were wrong with this movie. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like a lot of stuff is blown out of proportion because of just what she said.
Well, even if you take a look at Rotten Tomatoes right now, and the user review score is like in the 30s when the critic review is like in the high 80s. It's fluctuating from high 80s to low 90s. And it's at like 37%. And I was like, first of all, why would there be such a huge discrepancy? You know, especially coming off of people talking about their boycotting. And we've seen this happen before with other movies where people don't like A, Y, and Z that they're doing with that film. And they decide that they're going to try to do a power move. You know, it's like dealing with Tyler's power move. And decide that they're going to take this movie down through the internet.
And another thing I was hearing, particularly from Jeremy John, was that he was like, oh, well, this character didn't have any arc. Like, she was just a powerful warrior at the beginning, and she's a powerful warrior at the end. And I was like, actually, it's like what she said. She was a powerful warrior, but she had one hand tied behind her back. Like, she wasn't operating at full capacity. So I feel like what they're saying doesn't make any sense there. Like, yeah, she was powerful, but she didn't know who she, and that's basically what origin movies always are, is like, the person doesn't know the full potential of their power. So really, if you don't like that arc here, then you shouldn't like any of them. None of the Marvel movies, like the origin ones, like, you should be like, oh, this person, bland, nah, don't like it. So again, it's just hypocrisy, and it just really kind of made me upset, because I'm just like, grow up. Grow up.
It really is a call for, you know, people to grow up. If you don't like the movie, okay, don't like the movie. Every movie is not for everybody, but base the movie on its merit,
Right.
not because you feel like there's, and you can say that about any movie. You can say, well, there's a heterosexual male agenda in every movie I see.
And that's another thing. Like, to me, I didn't really see a really strong feminist agenda. Like, yeah, she was a woman. She was very powerful. They was playing, what's the song? I'm Just the Girl, whatever. Okay, you had those little things there, but to me, I didn't really get that whole, like,
I thought that
overbearing feminist.
If they had have played a little bit more with the memories, because you were seeing some notes of feminism in the things like what her dad was saying and some of the things that the other officers in the Air Force were saying to her. But it was very subtle. It was not preachy. It was not knocking you over the head with women are as good as men. We're better than men. It was not that type of movie. And, you know, people were saying, well, she said that this was a feminist movie. Well, she's saying that because she wants females to feel like it's okay for them to come out and see this movie. That the superhero landscape is not a boys' playground anymore. You know, we are a part of this audience that buys tickets too. You know, I know lots of females that are just as into comics and comic book movies as the next dude out there that will totally rock some cosplay at some of the Comic Cons and other conventions. So, you know, I think people just kind of read too much into that statement of it's a feminist movie. But what concerned me is they were saying the same thing about Wonder Woman, and I don't remember hearing that type of backlash. Do you?
No. And, you know, we didn't really care for Wonder Woman that much. I'll say, I saw a lot of people trying to, you know, compare these two movies. And I just feel like that's on a whole different, like, Wonder Woman is just, to me, a whole different type of superhero than Captain Marvel, to me. So the comparison to me doesn't really fit. But I mean, you know, to each his own. You know, some people like that one better. That's fine. But like I said, I just feel like I feel like that one might be a little bit more feminist than this one was.
It was.
So you know, I like you said, I don't know, you know, where people are really coming from. Like I said, it and we all know it comes from they just mad because of what she said. Like that's in
their
a nutshell.
egos are fragile. That's what.
They're
fragile and they do not want change. They want everything to stay the same. And when you have things that are staying the same, things don't get better. We are in a golden age, not even just for comic book movies, but I think for film in general. Like we get so many good movies. You do not have to wait year to year for another good movie to come out. Good movies are coming out almost every week. And so, you know, somebody said that in their Oscar speech. When you include women and people of color, it makes everything better. We're not saying we need to take away from, you know, white males or white females. We're saying let's all collaborate. When we all collaborate and bring our gifts and talents to the table, things are miraculous. Dare I say, marvelous.
Just had to go there at the end. One of the things I thought was interesting was that her weakness was emotion, and you know how we just talk about these men being extra emotional, and that was what was holding her back as well, is emotion. And I feel like it was almost like it's kind of a stereotypical thing where it's like women, they're very emotional, and so you have to kind of hold your emotions in check in order to be the best version of yourself. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Little thing that they kind of put in there that was her kryptonite or whatever.
I mean, and not even just from the I'm a Cree now standpoint, but from when she was, in her before life as a human, that guy was saying like, you're just too emotional, and as females, you hear that a lot.
You do.
And it ended up being, and which it is, it's our humanity, it's our emotions, and that's what gives us strength and power.
And I like that montage of her just kind of getting up every time that she's falling. Like, that was a good message, and visually I thought it really just kind of captured that theme that they were trying to push us, to get back up again. Another thing that was in there that kind of made me like, oh, this is interesting, was the separation of families and stuff with the scrolls. And it really kind of reminded me of, what has happened in America where, at the border they were separating families and stuff like that. And so I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting to kind of see a similar kind of situation play out, in this movie. And to see how, it's depraved to do stuff like that. And so I hope, as people watch this movie, they really kind of see like stuff like that should not be happening.
We're going to make people real mad. Our comment section is going to be off the chain, girl.
Oh, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, separating families, I feel like that's not controversial to me as far as what the resolution is. Like, people need to be with their family and their loved ones in order to grow and, be, successful. You need your family behind you. You don't need to be separated from them. Like, that's super traumatic, and I feel like that causes more issues than anything else.
I mean, I can definitely see where you're coming from, especially when you think about the angle of the Crees, the one that was revealed later in the movie, that they felt that they were the superior race, and that if they didn't want to be dominated, then they were going to be wiped out. So I can definitely see parallels to that. Maybe that's something else that,
Let's talk about some of this acting. We'll go ahead and get into some of that. I think that was one of the issues that I had with the movie, was that some of the acting was kind of forced, especially with the relationship with Captain Marvel. It just was. I just didn't believe it. Like, it just didn't. And, I mean, you had mentioned earlier, and I was like, yeah, that's the exact emotion you have. You see your friend approaching you that you think has been dead for, 6 years?
6 years.
Like, that is a moment where you are crying. Like, you are just kind of
sobbing.
Yeah, like you freezing up. Like, this is not just you mad. Like, oh, after 6 years, you're just gonna walk up in here. That's not the appropriate reaction to that. I don't feel.
It kind of reminds you of that stereotype of angry black men or
angry black women.
I mean,
yes, that's
we're not capable of softness and gentleness. Everything is
hard.
And And I just felt like that relationship was so forced, and I felt like her acting for those scenes that she was in were just not believable for me. Like, whenever she was on screen, I just wasn't feeling it. And I was trying to decide if it was because of my disappointment, because I mentioned this to you last night, because the original actress that they had to play that character had to back out because of season 2 of She's Gotta Have It. And I felt like she would have done a much better job. She is an extremely talented actress. But then as we discussed it further, I was like, yes, it's not my disappointment. It's the fact that it was not believable. And that was one of the points that I did agree with Jeremy John's review, is that, it wasn't believable. you didn't even get a chance to get invested in their relationship. And I think that was a missed
Yeah, I don't
opportunity
think they showed
because they were
enough of
trying
that
to do
real-
everything.
yeah.
This movie overall was trying to cover a lot of ground. And then it was a short movie on top of that as far as like runtime. And I just feel like if they maybe had have narrowed the scope of the story, it would have came out a little bit more
Like, really,
impactful.
they could have probably cut down that whole battle scene at the beginning with them and the Skrulls, and again, kind of tried to establish that relationship with the friend.
Because that was a pretty
Because
long
that was a
scene.
long scene. It was a lot. It was a lot in there, and I'm like, and actually, the beginning to me was probably the worst part of the movie. I was like, oh my gosh.
That has been a very
I
consistent.
went in there like, oh Lord, this movie is exactly what I thought it was about to be. Not good, because the trailers weren't good, and so I was like, oh gosh. But it definitely,
It picks up.
picked up and got better when she went to the C-53.
And that was one of the things that a lot of people were consistent about, was that the first half of the movie dragged, that there were some, pacing issues. And I definitely agree with that assessment. I felt it. And to me, it made the movie feel longer than it really was.
Yeah.
I was like, gosh, this movie's not over yet.
I really liked that they kind of showed the Air Force in a really kind of, I don't know, like a superhero type feel. I don't know. I just, our
armed forces are real
superheroes. So I really liked it.
superheroes.
And it was
That's
almost like, I
awesome.
felt like I was watching Top Gun for a minute. Like, it really had like a Top Gun feel to it. I was like, oh, snap.
And that's what the
Get
missed
about killing.
opportunity. That's the missed opportunity
Yeah.
of just little small nuggets of the flashbacks to her old life. Like, to get more of that would have really served this movie well. I
Yeah,
think. And I think
agree.
people would have gotten a lot more invested in Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, more invested with her and Maria Rambeau as best friends, and they really would have felt something. Because I'm not saying I didn't feel anything, but it was not an emotion, a huge.
It
emotional
wasn't enough
impact
there.
when you found out
It needed
that
to be a scene.
Jude Law's character had betrayed her.
Right,
It wasn't
right.
super impactful. You were just, in a lot of ways, I almost felt like it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just trying to do a lot. But I think that this movie did enough to connect the dots to where you kind of understood, like, who Captain Marvel is, how, her relationship with Nick Fury, how just kind of like how the whole Avengers thing just kind of came into, into existence. And so I feel like in that regard, that's good. One of the things that I'm sorry I didn't like was that cat. I'm sorry.
You didn't like the cat at all?
I didn't. Girl, I'm
Or
allergic
just
to
the-
cats, number one, so I'm already kind of jaded.
But it was a cute
But
cat.
it was a cute cat.
No,
But
it was a killer cat.
it was a little too much. I didn't like how he scratched out his eye, and that's how
I
he
didn't
ended up
like
with the
that.
patch. I was like, come on, y'all could have given me something better.
Well,
than
to
that.
me, I thought
But people loved it, so I mean, it was just me, obviously.
I have not felt a lot of love online for that. I was disappointed because I thought it was going to tie in to the line that he made about his eye, where he said, the last time I trusted a man, or the last time I trusted a person, I lost an eye. And so the whole
And
movie,
that's not a person.
The whole movie,
A cat is not a
exactly,
person.
or the flurkin's not. It's a species. It's an alien. And so the whole movie, I'm just waiting. And I think the missed opportunity was the scroll in the car. That would have made perfect sense with the seed that you dropped in that other movie. It would have been like, oh, that makes perfect sense because he's trusting that that's his partner, and he caused him to lose an eye in this accident. Another thing I wanted to bring up was, and I told you this last night, I didn't like the color grading of the movie. I felt it was really dark.
Yeah, some other
and I've
people
seen
said
it on
that
two
too.
different screens now, and I'm
They both were
sticking with
dark?
that. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't like it. I felt like it was the darkest movie that I've seen yet from the MCU, and especially in the end when she changed like her uniform to the red, the blue, and the gold, like that really should have been popping off the screen, and it felt really dull to me. Like it was hard for me to get excited, like, oh, she's getting her colors, and it was just kind of like, what is going on? Why is this looking so dull and dead?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna be honest. I feel like that was directing a lot of because you said it's a team. I forget who you said it was, but
Anna Boden and Ryan.
I feel like, and that's probably why it didn't have no tone. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the mood and stuff was just like all over the place because he probably, or one person's thinking, this for this scene, and another person thinking this for that scene, and maybe together they didn't really think about what this was gonna look like when you actually start putting these scenes and stuff together. Because like Daryl said, it seemed like an Agents of Shield movie. It really did feel like that for real. I think that's probably the most accurate
I'ma be honest
description
with
of
you.
this.
I didn't mind. I love Agents of Shield.
Yeah, I mean,
that was another disappointment for me. The minimal use of Agent Coulson. Like, you gonna bring Coulson back for that little bit of screen time?
Yeah,
I
it was
was
very
so
little.
disappointed.
It was very little.
I mean, because he's probably one of my top 3 favorite Marvel characters. But I do agree with that assessment. It was like
that's
Agents
the
of
most
S.H.I.E.L.D.
accurate
movie.
tone, and maybe that's what they were going for. They had been watching those, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, maybe that's just what they were trying to do, and people just didn't like what they were doing, but that was their intention. After watching this movie, I like Captain Marvel, and obviously she's gonna be the one that goes against the boss in
Is she
Endgame.
though?
Who else is gonna stop him?
Why not?
Nobody else has the authority,
You know what, though?
has the power.
Never think you know what Marvel's getting ready to do. Because I remember when they announced that Captain Marvel was going to be about the Kree Skrull War. Oh, that's a tongue twister for me. Kree Skrull War. And everybody was trying to guess which superhero or which person in the MCU was going to be a Skrull. And it wasn't about anybody being a Skrull. Not really. You know, none of the superheroes were turned into Skrulls. It was a completely different narrative than what we were expecting. And so I have faith that Endgame is going to be something that we didn't expect, because I didn't expect to see the snap in Infinity Wars. I thought they were really going to save the day. And so I was shocked.
But you said something, and I think this will be the last thing we talk about, that after credits scene, you said you didn't like it.
I don't want to say I didn't like it.
It
I
was,
just
it
felt
was a problem.
very,
What was the problem?
it wasn't even necessarily, I just felt that it was pretty predictable. I felt like it wasn't anything that I couldn't have deduced on my own. And, a lot of people that saw it ahead of time were like, oh, don't move. You're really going to want to see this end credit scene because it ties in perfectly to Endgame. And I was like, okay, I kind of already knew that they were going to be trying to figure out what this pager was going to do. But one of my issues was, how did they get the pager? I felt like that could be a possible plot hole because everything turned to dust. Except for the pager. So, I mean, but I need to stop because these movies always require a leap of faith. I feel like I'm being overly critical.
No, I think that's a good point, because if it's dust on the floor and then you just find a random pager, you don't know whose dust that was.
Yeah, because I mean, Black Widow was like, it was Fury's, and you better believe if he had it, it means something, and we need to figure out who's on the other end. And I was like, but how does she know that it's Fury's? How does she know that Fury sent the signal? It just seemed like a little bit of a stretch. But like I said, I think maybe I'm being a little bit overly critical because my expectations were pretty high. Like, I felt like it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I've seen it twice now, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I just felt like it was lacking.
Mm-hmm. So what's your overall rating for this?
I would give this movie a 7 out of 10. Okay. 7 out of 10.
I would give it like a B minus, close to a C. Like I said, it was like the beginning part really kind of took me out, but luckily they did get me back towards the middle there. Like you said, the kind of the tone of it was kind of ambiguous as far as mood and stuff for a movie began.
Like it will be interesting to see where they go with a sequel, because the way that they ended with her going off into space with the Skrulls. Mm-hmm. Are we going to get a story about what happened to her, or is that going to be an Endgame? Where is her sequel going to pick up? I'm excited for you guys to go out and check this movie out. I think it is definitely worth your time and your money. You do not need to get drunk to enjoy this movie, but if you want to,
more power to you.
More power to you. I will say this, though, just as kind of like a little small advisory. My son, Dominic, that was on camera earlier, was a little little bit afraid of the Skrulls when they were on camera. However, Dinah was not, and I also took my other 3-year-old that was not. So just, test your kids out with the trailer just to make sure, because he was pretty nervous when they were on screen, even after it was shown that they were actually the good guys.
All right, well, that's our review for Captain Marvel. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.